Gideon, the reluctant warrior. The sun dipped low over the hills of Ophrah, casting a golden haze over the dry, dusty ground. Gideon, a farmer by trade, wiped the sweat from his brow as he threshed wheat in a winepress, an unusual choice of location, but desperate times called for desperate measures. The Midianites had been terrorizing Israel for 7 years, their raiders stripping the land bare of crops and livestock. Fear was a constant companion, and Gideon had learned to work in secret, lest his harvest be stolen. As he worked, the sound of rustling leaves made him freeze. His heart raced. Was it another Midianite scout? Slowly, he turned, his hands gripping the shaft of his wooden threshing tool. But it wasn't a raider. It was a man sitting beneath the terebinth tree nearby. Or was it? The stranger had an otherworldly air about him, his presence calming, yet commanding. "Greetings, mighty warrior," the man said, his voice rich and steady. Gideon blinked, unsure if he'd heard correctly. Mighty warrior? He glanced around, half expecting someone else to step forward. "Pardon me, my lord," he replied, his tone skeptical. "But if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? Where are all his wonders that our ancestors told us about? The Lord has abandoned us and given us into the hand of Midian." The man's expression remained unshaken. "Go in the strength you have and save Israel out of Midian's hand. Am I not sending you?" Gideon laughed nervously. "Me? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my family." The stranger stepped closer, his gaze piercing yet kind. "I will be with you," he said, "and you will strike down all the Midianites, leaving none alive." A test of faith. Despite his doubts, Gideon couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was divine. That night, he built an altar to the Lord, calling it, "The Lord is Peace." But still, uncertainty gnawed at him. To test the messenger, Gideon devised a plan. "Lord," he prayed, laying out a fleece on the threshing floor, "if you are truly going to save Israel by my hand, let the fleece be wet with dew in the morning, but the ground around it dry." The next morning, Gideon found the fleece soaked, wringing out a bowl full of water. Yet doubt lingered. "Don't be angry with me," he said, "but let me make just one more request. This time, let the fleece be dry and the ground covered with dew." God obliged. The next morning, the fleece was dry while the ground glistened with dew. Gideon's heart raced. This was no ordinary call. It was divine. The army of 300 bolstered by God's assurance, Gideon gathered an army of 32,000 men. But the Lord had other plans. "You have too many men," he told Gideon. "I cannot deliver Midian into their hands, or Israel would boast that their own strength saved them." Reluctantly, Gideon obeyed, as God whittled his army down to just 300 men. The method was unconventional. Those who drank water by lapping it like dogs were chosen. Gideon looked over the small band of men, their resolve unshaken, despite their small number. Fear gripped him, but God whispered reassurance. Victory in the night. That night, Gideon and his servant Purah crept down to the edge of the Midianite camp. The valley below teemed with thousands of soldiers and camels, as numerous as sand on the seashore. Overwhelmed, Gideon paused to gather his courage. Suddenly, they overheard 2 Midianite soldiers talking. "I had a dream," one said. "A loaf of barley bread tumbled into the camp and struck a tent with such force that it overturned and collapsed." His companion replied, "This can be nothing other than the sword of Gideon son of Joash, the Israelite. God has given the Midianites and the whole camp into his hands." Gideon's heart swelled with newfound confidence. He returned to his men, and laid out the plan. They would attack using nothing but trumpets, clay jars, and torches hidden inside. At Gideon's signal, the men surrounded the camp. They blew their trumpets, smashed their jars, and shouted, "A sword for the Lord and for Gideon!" The sound and sight of the torches threw the Midianites into a frenzy. Believing they were under attack by a massive force, they turned on each other in chaos. The aftermath. By dawn, the Midianites were defeated, and Israel was free from their oppression. The people tried to make Gideon their king, but he refused. "The Lord will rule over you," he said, ever humble, despite his victory. Gideon's story is one of faith and obedience. Though he doubted, he trusted in God's power to work through him. And in doing so, he proved that even the least among us can become mighty warriors when God is on their side.